back to Anti-imperialist America. I'm your host, Dust James. It is a beautiful Sunday morning in my humble rural home in North Carolina. Um, right now, I'm working retail, delivering to stores, and I'm doing this route up Virginia and back, delivering between 300 to 600 pieces a day. Throwing a truck as well as about 8 hours of driving, working 6 days a week up to the Christmas rush. I'm a little tired. Um, I'm still glad to be here with lovely folks and comrades. What I do here is, I believe, is a beautiful thing. Every it's starting to be every Sunday because this is my one day off. Basically, every Sunday I come on here and discuss what I've researched and understood and how I apply Marxism to the current world. And I dive into the different topics every week from a working class perspective and uniquely, a rural working class perspective um, that's needed, that can reach a bigger audience. Um, Hopefully, get as many as people to support the cause of socialism. Shout out to Bennett Lloyd. Good morning from NYC. Glad to catch the scream. And shout out to American Red 1917. Good to see you, comrade. Max the Sax. Well, Max the Sax, thank you. And it's very inspiring to have young folks and who want to get involved in understanding Marxist Leninism. And what about that conference last night with CPI? I was actually scheduled for a 20-minute slot, and I prepared the best I could given my long work week, and then I got a little confused. So I think Justin put in the comments 15 minutes left. I was only gone 5 minutes. I looked at the timer and it said 20 minutes. I'm like, oh man, my time's up. I got 20 minutes, and I ended it quite early. My presentation was ended quite early because for some reason, in my overworked, tired, passionate rant that I got into, I ended it a little early. But I think it's positive. For folks who don't follow Caleb Maupin, he does great Marxist analysis as well. And if you want to go on his channel and look at the CPI Conference, was the Towards the Fall of Empire, was beautiful, and that presentation by Justin Simons, wow, beautiful. If I could just put it into a few words, the idea of countries working together for the benefit of the world, for peace and prosperity, never really happened. The imperialists own NATO and the UN, and they use those institutions to further their imperialist rule. But there is a rising anti-imperialist bloc that favors cooperation over imperialist exploitation. China, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, they've implemented socialist policies to overcome US imperialist aggression and exploitation. And their strength is pushing the world towards socialism. Socialism, where the main goal is to improve people's lives. Socialism, where the main goal is, if I could say it in 4 words, increase the productive forces. Increase the productive forces is the absolute goal of socialism. It is only through abundance we can come upon the idea of communism, where we can take as we will, work as we will, and not only reproduce, but to continue to advance society. And that takes socialism. In every socialist country that has existed in reality, the Soviet Union, China, that has been their number one goal, increasing productive forces. It's very different from imperialism, which destroys competition, which keeps dependent countries in poverty and chaos for the for the benefit of Wall Street bankers and oil companies. The same Bank Street, the same Wall Street bankers and oil companies that refuse to pay us fair wages here, that oppress our brothers and sisters of oppressed nations in the Black Belt, Afro America, Aslan, who discriminate in housing policies, policing policies, documented status, all a way of keeping the working class and oppressed nations down to continue the profits of the Wall Street oligarchs. Well, I'm very happy to have all the folks on here. Quindy, good morning. I really don't like your name, Mr. Jedi. I know that's an insult people have been using, but applying that oneself out of proud of as like, I am that, deal with it. I'm not sure if that's the best strategy, but you're welcome here, and various ideas are welcome here. I noticed that if I go on Facebook and if I put the settings to public, I can see the settings. I can see the comments in the chat here. Let me go ahead and do that right quick. Edit privacy. I put my Facebook on public, and then I don't have to continue to refer to this phone. Yep, and now it's public. So if anybody on here is watching from Facebook, get in the comments, put a comment. I'll give you a shout out. I'll promote whatever you want. If I'll promote anything that you're looking into that's positive, get in the Facebook comments, and so I can test. Comrade alpha male. Okay, is China capitalist or socialist? China is socialist. China is socialist because the necessity of the people. Their stated goal is to eliminate poverty. That is the goal of the Communist Party in China. They have centralized and planned the economy for the benefit of the working class and their country, and that is socialist. Doesn't matter how big of a market sector you have. It doesn't matter how many instances of corruption or all the problems they may have, including exploitation. If the sole purpose of an institution is to control the productive forces for the benefit of the people in the country, that is a socialist government. And that is my quick answer. Tim Stacey says, any good left-wing country music artist? And I would have to say my favorite left-wing country music artist overall would have to be Chris Christopherson. Chris Christopherson is was invited by the Sandinistas to sing a song praising the Sandinistas. That is how based Chris Christopherson is. And probably today, my favorite is an anarchist, which I call Comrade, because he's genuinely anarchist and against the war, Sturgill Simpson. And his song, which I actually did I sung a little bit of, not well, mind you. Sturgill Simpson, an anarchist Navy veteran. I actually gave a highlight of his song on the last episode of Working Class Revolt that Caleb Maupin was also featured in. I believe I'm going to start American Red 19. I believe that's Max the Sax. Max says, we need American redemption through socialism. What it means to be American currently isn't good. We must transform America on the basis of socialism, patriotism, solidarity between all peoples. And I really do like the concept of New America. There's a student group, Students and Youth for a New America. And I think my vision of a new America would be where we end the exploitation of socialism, but it's very important also to dismantle the institutions of national oppression. national oppression, Afro America, Aslan. We have to be taken consideration. And if there's forces in the national movement that don't like the slogan America, it's their right to like that. But when you got these leftist, bourgeois leftists going to working class people being like F American, what have you, and that's all they ever know, that's counterproductive. But I mean, it's a balance. It's a thin line to walk. Mr. Jedi, if someone's on the Facebook, please put a comment, because I've yet to have a comment on the Facebook. This is usually not normal. Usually my Facebook audience is bigger. My YouTube audience is smaller. I have quite a bit of YouTube audience today. Mr. Jedi, Pete Seeger, Tim Stacy, Pete Seeger's good, although I don't know if it was. There's a lot of mixed folk and country. It's a little mixed up. If you're looking into folk today, I interviewed David Rovix. David Rovix, his songs about Blair Mountain, the Republic, the St. Patrick's Battalion, some of his great songs praising. He's also an anarchist, but he praises communists. Unlike most anarchists, he praises communists hardcore in his work. And I have a lot of respect for David Rovix. He put out an album on vinyl, which I have and I really love. So let's see, a few notes. Let me get into my program. If Pete, as far as it is now, I really love comments and participation. And if I have time and I see a comment that's worth noting, I would love to repeat your comment. And I'd love to give shout outs to people. If you want to get in the comments and say where you're coming from, you got a question or a comment or a suggestion, please get in the comments as much as possible. And I'll try to read those out if I have time. I see something noteworthy. So I'll get in today's program. Today's program is China Makes Country Music's Dream a Reality. I was reading, I actually got the Wall Street Journal back. Now that I'm off the road, as I was saving up all my now that I'm off the road, I was saving up all my Wall Street Journals. And I was looking over them on the weekend all at once. Now that I have a local job, I wake up at 2 a.m., I pull out the driveway, and the Wall Street Journal's sitting there right in the yard. And I really like the Wall Street Journal. It's basically owned by Fox News, and it's imperialist and capitalist, but it's very direct and to the point. Unlike New York Times and other that try to, add a lot of fluff to it, it's direct and to the point. It is the voice of the capitalist, and you can really kind of see what's going on quickly if you know how to read between the lines in the Wall Street Journal. And one of the ones that I found there was an article in here about China. And, it's somewhat attacking towards China. It calls it authoritarian. It mentions falsehoods about the Uyghurs and other things. But it also highlights the economic issues, which they perceive as capitalism. But we know as a planned economy, the benefits of the planned economy in China. Basically, capitalist, anything good China does, they will say it's because they're capitalist. Anything bad they do is because they're communist. And the reality is, most of the good coming out of China is because of the planned economy. Because China has been able to grow 3 times that in the United States for the last 3 decades, because of the planned economy. So there was an article in here that brought me tears, just inspiring what's going on in China. And that is, China urges new migration area back to the countryside. And I guess I'll just read a bit of it. Now, thanks to President Xi Jinping's push to create new opportunities for China's have-nots, Miss Wang is back in her hilltop town. Last year, she and her family returned and plowed their mountainous savings into a guest house they called Meet, Come, Enjoy. China's rural poor have been a tool of the Communist Party strategy since Mao Zedong. Rallied them into his revolution, herded them into communal farms, um, continued on A10. Let me go ahead and bring it over to A10 for y'all. Oh. Yeah. Okay, commuted them in the Hermal Fault with disastrous results. Decade later, Deng Xiaoping sent them to urban construction sites and factories. Mr. Xi is pressing them into service for a third time. To narrow the gulf between China's urban rich and rural poor, he's trying to populate rural towns with entrepreneurs and consumers. Mr. Xi has pledged to eradicate poverty this year ahead of the Communist Party's centenary in 2021. And you have a picture here of Xi Jinping. You have a picture of Xi Jinping sitting with village people in a mountain town, rural folks, hardworking rural folks in a mountain town. A modest means. You see their house behind them, brick, very, very humble. And there's the president of the country. You ain't got no bodyguards around. You don't have the crazy the craziness you have in the United States when a president comes to town and the limo thing. And I remember being in Occupy Wall Street saying, "Hey, Obama, we're no fool. We know you're a corporate tool." Just level of anger, especially when President Trump and how divided the country is here in the United States. Well, here you have a president of a country going out to a rural town, loved by the people. Look at the smiles on the faces of the people around President Xi Jinping. And it's because they know that he's improving the material conditions of the working class. The same phenomena happens with Maduro in Venezuela. Maduro, there's a picture, I made a meme page called Nicolas Maduro's Dank Meme Page. And forever on the background, I put Maduro was a fellow driver. Maduro drove buses before becoming president. And there's a picture of him driving the bus and waving to the people. And the people ecstatic because they know that Maduro built homes. Well, on the new project, China's new push is to improve the lives of rural workers in the countryside, invest in the countryside, use the centralized economy to bring jobs to the countryside. And the people were so happy after meeting Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping says, "What do you guys need?" And then days later, masses of workers are sent down to create those projects. It isn't like where it gets caught up with, a government of action. Like in the United States is highly inefficient, and the inefficiency works for the benefit of the capitalists. They say they're going to do something. They blame the other party for never getting things done for the working class. Xi Jinping goes to a countryside town, says they're going to get a school, says they're going to get a hospital, says they're going to have this many jobs, and it happens the next day because the government is planned and controls the economy for the benefit of the people. And the people were so happy. They nailed those chairs to the ground, encased the peanuts in the table, and have been using that as a tourist attraction. So other people can come see the work the president is doing to improve the lives of rural Chinese. Now, so I'll get into why the name of the show is China Makes Country Music's Dream a Reality. So let's talk about country music. Let's talk about everything that is culture. is it's base and superstructure. Culture is superstructure. Base is the economic political reality that forms and makes possible the culture. So why? So what is country music? It is a phenomenon in the United States that is rural, mostly rural culture and music. Started out banjos, steel guitars, and it started like it got kind of big. It was very, very small, didn't really get a lot of attention until about Hank Williams in the 1940s. And and it was still small. And you had radio DJ hosts, and it was getting bigger and it was getting bigger. It really didn't take off until the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And the reason why it took off in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s is because it was the deruralization. People were singing country music and buying country music albums because they were being forced to move into cities. They're forced to move into cities and they were giving income. This was the time when the unions were still around. They kicked the communists out in the 50s, but we still had a union and a bit of a labor aristocracy. 60s and 70s, probably the high point of the American labor aristocracy was the 60s and 70s. And many of these newly urbanized workers and semi urbanized workers were pushed away from agriculture as agriculture industrialized. Less people were needed for farm work. So in the transition from country living to the more of an industrialized proletariat, people started to miss the more simple country way of life. And a lot of country music is nostalgia for country living and a country life. It's got some reactionary tendencies because overall the urbanization of workers, people moving from the countryside and moving to factories was an improvement on their lives. But there's a lot of stress that goes with clocking in every day, doing the same repetitive task. There's a lot of stress, and there's more police forces that tell you what to do and what not to do. And you can see why people be like, man, I wish I could go home and see an open field and see my parents and listen to the music from the country. And that's why country music sold to those those new industrialized, urbanized workers. Country music took off. 1960s, 1970s. And country music, a lot of it, if you look at Dolly Parton's Tennessee Mountain Home, she's nostalgizing and romanticizing early country life. Now, I call it country's dream because what they're talking about never really existed. Country life was hard. Rural farm life was hard in the 1930s and 1940s. Listen to Woody Guthrie about sharecroppers, songs about sharecroppers. Life was hard, but people forced in the factory situations, they wanted to have something. So they made up this country, this kind of rural, this romanticized rural lifestyle that it almost had the material improvements of, industrialized life, but did not have a lot of the stress that went along with urbanized living. So they almost made this country dreamland in their songs. There's a lot of songs that talk about this. Merle Haggard, Big City, which has some reactionary lyrics in it, attacking Social Security. But overall, it's about I'm sick. Merle Haggard's Big City song is I'm stuck doing this factory. I want to get out. I want to fish and I want to be free and I want to go raise hell out in the country. And outlaw music was a lot like that. People stuck in factory jobs, clocking in, clocking out, got the cops fucking with you. You in a neighborhood, you're all up on top of your neighbor. You want that country living and that life. You want to be left alone. You want to have freedom. You want to be able to shoot guns. You want to be able to fish. And it's a dream. And capitalism never really made that an economic reality, unless some portions of the labor aristocracy might have been able to do that. Um, And if this is an interesting note, I'm getting into a very similar occurrence happened in Mexican country music. The deruralization, the urbanization of workers in the United States happened 1960s, 70s. In Mexico, a mass migration happened in the mid to late 90s from southern Mexico. And there was regional, just like US country music was, just starting in 1940s. In Mexican country music, rural country music, going back, Tigres Nortes from Los Angeles, but some like basic country music in Mexico really blasted off with after the signing of NAFTA. After the signing of NAFTA, when rural peasants, for the most part, people who were living on the land plots that were won, mostly corn growing land plots that were won in the 1910 Mexican Revolution, their music spread like fire when rural peasants and workers were forced to the United States to avoid starvation that was caused by NAFTA. And there was a huge live regional Mexican music scene here in my state, North Carolina. I got some good friends. I did roadie one or two times and drove the truck for a local Mexican band. And basically, people came here. They were forced to deal with even worse conditions, working in La Pollera, the chicken plant, um, being harassed by the cops, having undocumented status, and dealing with the harsh life that is to be an undocumented person in the United States. People wanted to feel like, oh, I miss my home, I miss my parents, I miss my rancho. If only if I could save up enough money, I could go back and I could buy some goats and I could buy some chickens. And a lot of Mexican country music, Los Tucanes, Las Players, Tiracale, a lot of these Mexican banda groups were painting a romanticized version of country life that the working class Mexicans missed because they were forced by capitalism to migrate to the United States and work in tobacco and poultry processing and other industries. So there's also correlations between the material economics between Mexican country music and United States country music. And why am I saying China makes country music's dream a reality? Well, if you look at the article, so let's talk about the United States. In the United States, rural America is falling apart. If you go down, one of the most horrible, sad scenes is middle America. If you go down to along the Mississippi and parts of Missouri, out there, I remember seeing towns where all the local businesses were boarded up. The only business left in the rural towns in the heartland of the United States is you got a gambling den, a liquor store, and a gas station, maybe a government building. But all the local businesses boarded up, shuttered out, people fleeing those areas. Um, and that's because we have a capitalist economy that doesn't care about rural workers. People have to go to survive wherever they can. In China, where they had a similar pattern and they had similar problems. Um, a lot of rural worker that the rural people are really what made China powerful. First from the revolution, then issues with the collectivized farming, and then it became rural workers in China became America's labor force in production. And they use that investment, they use that labor to revitalize and build up their country, escape imperialism. And now they have the resources. They're going back to the neglected countryside. They're reinvesting in the countryside, reinvesting infrastructure in the countryside. They are making the dream of country music, Mexican banda country music, and US country music, the dream of a rural economy with the pleasures of simple country living and economic reality of being able to sustain yourself comfortably. They are making that reality a reality in China. And it is socialism, is harnessing the power of planning and socialism to make country music's dream a reality in China. Just as China is making the American dream a reality, not here, but in China. We're seeing in the United States, home ownership is lowering. Neighborhoods are being gentrified. We're being pushed into destitute and poverty as the empire falls. They have 90% home ownership in China. And I could go over that, but it's another article I saw. And I thought that was interesting. And that made me cry. I think about moving. I moved from a rural town, Appalachian, northern Appalachia, south central upstate New York, around Ithaca. And you got a college town up there, but outside that college town, you got little or nothing. Then you can work the industrial dairy farms. You can work in the hay fields, baling hay, hard work. You can work on the dairy farms. The dairy farms have a lot of issues. They're subsidized by the government. They throw out a lot of milk, and they're not the best to their workers to begin with. There's a lot. If we had a planned economy, and we invested in these rural areas, and we invested in industries that people needed, we could rebuild rural America, rebuild a socialist rural America, and make the dream of country music a reality. So I thought that was an interesting talk and a little bit of a rant I had, going over. Basically, what I do is I work 70, 80 hours a week. And while in 8 hours I'm driving, I'll put on Caleb Maupin, I'll put on folks at Tele-Hagwire, Black Agenda Report, and I'll listen to all my anti-imperial, the Gray Zone, Empire Files. I'll listen to all my favorite communists and anti-imperialists, and I'll study that, and I'll be thinking about ideas for this weekly sermon that I do, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And I'm going to continue to do that later today at 1:00. I'm going to be interviewing a comrade, I believe he's a Taiwanese immigrant, who wrote a great article called Anti-Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Resistance. That's it for my opening notes. I think I'll go back over the comments quickly, and we'll call it a morning. We'll call this a short live. Space Communist, all my exes live in Texas. That's a good song. Moved to Tennessee. I wonder if that song, the person that wrote that song, were they actually avoiding Texas, or were they moving to some of the jobs that opened up in Texas because of the capitalist economy? And they just blame their ex-girlfriends on it because of that. Everything comes from the material. Stuart Edwards, and Good Old Days When Times Were Bad, written by Dolly Parton, made famous by Burl Haggard. Exactly. And there is some of the exposing of the reality of country life, but there's also a romanticism of it. Edward Stewart, that song will bring your eyes to tears. I'll have to look into that one. Forced migration to the West is definitely a modern day slave trade. Absolutely. A lot of my community members were immigrants from southern rural Mexico. After NAFTA passed, they basically had to flee starvation. And the Democrats built the fencing to begin with. Thousands of people died in the desert because of mostly the Democrats' policy of first NAFTA and then the fencing. The people that did come here, they actually was a very active regional Mexican music scene, mid 90s into the 2000s. And I got to see some of that. It's beautiful, good time, working people coming together Whole families would come out. I went to a few rodeos. I've seen Tigres del Norte several times, and it really is a working class culture. Is from country music to Mexican banda music is humanity, which is beautiful, like a flower growing up through the concrete and showing its beauty. Its beauty. Um, Watkins Glen is the berries. Okay, all my exes live in Texas. Torches and pit. Do you cook your books when driving? They that's changed. They're actually implementing. Um, when I was doing over the road, I had mostly electronic logs. Electronic logs are very hard to falsify, and they're actually pushing laws to get more and more people to get on electronic laws. My current job is a local job, and I'm right on the edge of having to do a logbook. But because I'm within 170 air miles of my destination, I no longer have to do a logbook. I think there's other stipulations that I don't have to go through. Max the Sachs Red American Red should, as a part of urban intelligentsia, the same point in my life, move to the countryside to help familiarize myself with American countryside and people. I wish to truly spread socialism, and that's interesting. I think that socialists are going to be needed in all sectors. I think whatever community that you are a part of, you have the deepest roots in, that is who you should be organizing. People you're most friendly and comfortable around, and people detached from either of the main imperialist parties. Find out where you're from, who is around you, your roots. Look, study those roots and study socialist understandings within those roots as a way of spreading socialism. Anasaur Marie, I'm a Marxist Leninist truck driver. I work all week to provide for my family. And I come on here and support and spreads and help to spread socialism. Lucas 2 Market, I will listen while I frame in my porch right on. GPS torches. It's not really GPS. It's an electronic logbook. Anytime the truck moves, it sends a center. It has a sensor and it tells the truck's moving and puts you onto the drive line. Okay, well I think that's all the questions on Facebook and YouTube. I want to thank everyone for being here. Catch that interview with me later today at 1 o'clock. And then on Friday at 8 p.m., me and David Fox will be broadcasting Working Class Revolt. We're going to talk about some of the trade issues going on between Australia and China, big developments. All right, friends, as always, all power to the people.